On our anniversary, my wife threw my gift in the trash. I don't want handmade junk. My daughter laughed. You can't compete with mom's new boyfriend, Dad. I didn't argue. I just took it out of the trash. The next day, she saw it in a gallery window with a $150,000 price tag. So here's the thing about anniversaries. They're supposed to be this magical celebration of love, commitment, and all that Hallmark card nonsense that makes you believe in happily ever after, right? Well, let me tell you about my 10th anniversary, which turned out to be less fairy tale ending and more public execution with appetizers. Picture this scene. Candles flickering on our dining room table like they're trying to set the mood for romance. Some smooth jazz playing in the background that I'd carefully curated from a Spotify playlist called Romantic Dinner Vibes. And me, your friendly neighborhood sentimental husband who still believes in grand gestures, standing there like an idiot with the biggest, proudest smile plastered across my face. In my hands, a gift I'd spent 4 months building in my workshop, pouring my heart, soul, and what remained of my sanity into every single detail. This wasn't just any gift, folks. This was a custom walnut sculpture box, sleek as hell, symbolic as a Renaissance painting, carved with our initials intertwined in this beautiful Celtic knot pattern that took me weeks to get right. I'm talking about 200 hours of meticulous labor, 3 broken drill bits that I had to special order because apparently I'm the only person in America still using that particular size, and 1 singed eyebrow from when I got a little too enthusiastic with the wood burner. Yeah, that was a fun trip to urgent care. How did you burn your eyebrow, sir? Art, ma'am. I burned it for art. She didn't look impressed either, now that I think about it. But I digress. There I stood, watching my wife Clara unwrap this masterpiece with the kind of anticipation that would make a kid on Christmas morning look like a nihilist. I'd wrapped it in this gorgeous handmade paper I'd driven 40 minutes to get from this artisan shop, because God forbid I use regular wrapping paper for something this significant. The moment of truth arrived. She pulled back the final layer, and there was my baby, gleaming under the candlelight, every curve and edge perfection incarnate. And what did I get in response? Silence. Not the good kind of silence, like when someone's so moved they can't speak. Nope. This was the awkward, uncomfortable silence you get when someone opens a fruitcake from their weird aunt and has to pretend they're not dying inside. Then came that sigh. Oh man, that sigh? You know the one I'm talking about. The one that says, I'm embarrassed you exist in the same dimension as me. The one that makes you question every life choice that led you to this exact moment. The one that could freeze lava and make puppies sad. I told you I wanted the Cartier bracelet, she said, not even looking at me, just staring at my 4 months of blood, sweat, and tears like it was a piece of driftwood she'd found on the beach. Her voice had that flat, disappointed quality that I'd become intimately familiar with over the years. The same tone she used when I forgot to buy the organic almond milk or when I had the audacity to breathe too loudly during her yoga sessions. Now, I could have let that slide. I could have been the bigger person, nodded apologetically, and promised to return my heartfelt creation for some overpriced piece of metal with a designer logo. But you know what? I was tired. Tired of being the punching bag. Tired of my efforts meaning absolutely nothing. Tired of feeling like I was auditioning for the role of husband in my own marriage and constantly getting rejected. So I looked her dead in the eye and said, I told you I wanted affection. Just put it out there, plain and simple. Guess we were both disappointed. The look on her face was priceless, somewhere between shock that I'd actually grown a spine and annoyance that I'd dared to express a human emotion in her presence. But before this beautiful moment of marital tension could fully develop into the argument it deserved to become, something even better happened. Or worse, depending on how you look at it. Thud. That sound. That hollow, final, soul-crushing thud of my masterpiece. My 200-hour labor of love. Hitting the bottom of our kitchen trash can. Right there, next to last night's takeout containers and coffee grounds. Clara just stood up, walked over to the trash, and dumped it like she was disposing of junk mail. I don't want handmade junk, she muttered, not even trying to soften the blow. Just straight up called 4 months of my life junk. No hesitation, no second thought, just pure, concentrated contempt wrapped up in 4 little words. I stood there, frozen, watching my anniversary gift nestle between a banana peel and an empty yogurt container, trying to process what had just happened. My brain was doing that thing where it can't quite catch up with reality. Like when you're watching a horror movie and the monster appears, but your mind needs a second to register that yes, this is actually happening, and yes, you should probably scream now. But wait, it gets better. Because just when I thought this anniversary couldn't possibly get any more humiliating, my teenage daughter Sophie decided to chime in from her throne on the living room couch, where she'd apparently been watching this entire disaster unfold like it was her personal entertainment for the evening. She actually giggled, like a cute little laugh that would have been adorable in any other context, and said, "Come on, Dad, you can't compete with Mom's new boyfriend. He buys designer stuff." "Excuse me, what? New boyfriend?" She said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather or mentioning that we were out of milk. My 15-year-old daughter just confirmed that my wife had a boyfriend, new boyfriend, implying there had been others, and she did it with the same energy as someone ordering a pizza. Meanwhile, Clara didn't even flinch, didn't deny it, didn't show even a microscopic hint of shame or regret. She just picked up her phone and started scrolling like Sophie had mentioned what she ate for lunch. Ah yes, family bonding. Nothing quite warms the heart like being roasted in perfect stereo by the two people who are supposed to love you most in this world. Nothing says happy anniversary quite like finding out your marriage is a joke, your art is trash, and your teenager knows more about your wife's love life than you do. This was my Norman Rockwell painting, my slice of Americana, my dream come true. I just stood there in that moment, candles still flickering stupidly, jazz still playing its smooth, oblivious tunes, looking between the trash and holding my heart and the family that had just collectively decided I wasn't worth basic human decency. And you know what the worst part was? Some tiny, pathetic part of me was still thinking, maybe I should have just bought the bracelet. Because that's what years of this kind of treatment does to you. It makes you think that somehow, some way, you're the problem. That if you'd just been better, done more, tried harder, maybe you'd be worth loving. But standing there, looking at my daughter smirking at her phone and my wife already texting someone, probably the boyfriend with the designer budget, something clicked. Not dramatically, not like a movie moment with swelling music. Just a quiet, simple realization. I was done. Done apologizing for being thoughtful. Done feeling guilty for not being rich enough or cool enough or whatever enough. Done letting these people make me feel small. Though I didn't know it yet, that trash can was about to become the best thing that ever happened to me. Funny how that works, isn't it? I just stood there, staring at that trash can like it held the answers to life's greatest mysteries. You know that feeling when something so absurd happens that your brain just kind of shorts out for a minute? Like when you see someone wearing Crocs with socks, or when your GPS tells you to turn right into a lake. That's where I was, mentally. 3 months of sweat. And I mean literal sweat because my workshop doesn't have air conditioning and I'd been working through the summer. With dust that had infiltrated every possible crevice of my body, including places I didn't know would dust could reach, and questionable life choices that included skipping my buddy's poker night approximately 17 times to sand this thing until my fingerprints nearly disappeared. All of it was sitting in that trash can, right next to a half-eaten burrito that I'm pretty sure had been there since Tuesday. The rational part of my brain was screaming at me to say something, to defend myself, to stand up and declare that this was unacceptable behavior and demand the respect I deserved as a human being and husband. But you know what I did instead? Absolutely nothing. Didn't say a single word. Just stood there like a mannequin at a department store going out of business, watching my family continue their evening like they hadn't just collectively taken a sledgehammer to my soul. Clara had already moved on to the couch, getting comfortable with her phone, while Sophie was doing that thing teenagers do where they're simultaneously on their phone, watching TV, and judging you all at the same time. Multitasking at its finest. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, I walked over to the kitchen closet and pulled out my work gloves. The heavy-duty ones I use for rough carpentry, because God forbid I touch something that's been in the trash with my bare hands. Some dignity had to be maintained here, even if I was literally dumpster diving in my own kitchen. I reached into that trash can, carefully navigating around the burrito remains and what appeared to be an empty container of Greek yogurt, and pulled out my sculpture. My baby. My masterpiece. My 4-month testament to the fact that I still believed in romance like some kind of delusional Disney character. And you know what? It had salsa on it. Actually, it had salsa on it. A little orange glob of what I think was chipotle salsa, sitting right there on the corner where I'd spent 6 hours perfecting the curve. 6 hours of my life, now accessorized with Mexican condiments. I grabbed a paper towel and wiped it off, being as gentle as possible, because even though this thing had just been trash canned by the woman who promised to love me forever, I still cared about it. Funny how that works. I had more respect for this piece of wood than my own wife had for me. Waste management with feelings. I muttered to myself, and honestly, that should be my new brand. Forget carpenter, forget artisan, forget husband. I'm now officially a waste management specialist who happens to have emotional depth. Put that on a business card and see how many networking events I get invited to. I carefully wrapped the sculpture in an old towel, making sure to protect it from any further indignity, because apparently it needed a bodyguard from my own family. Meanwhile, from the living room, I could hear Clara's voice getting all animated and giggly. You know that tone, the one she used to use when we first started dating, back when I apparently still had value as a human being. Yeah, that one. Except now it was directed at her phone screen. I glanced over, and sure enough, she was on FaceTime with someone. The angle of her phone and the way she was twirling her hair like a teenager at a boy band concert told me everything I needed to know. This had to be Bryce, the boyfriend, the designer gift buying, yacht having, a possessing Bryce that my daughter had so casually mentioned approximately 10 minutes ago. I caught a glimpse of the screen, because of course I looked. I'm only human. And yep, there he was. Square jaw, perfect hair that probably required more product than a small salon, and what appeared to be a nautical-themed background that screamed, "I own a boat, and I need you to know about it." Clara was laughing at something he said, that genuine, full laugh that I hadn't heard directed at anything I'd said in probably 3 years. Maybe 4. Who's counting? Me. I'm counting. Obviously. So I told the guy at the marina. Bryce was saying, his voice coming through the phone speaker because Clara apparently wanted everyone to hear this riveting tale, that if he couldn't get the teak refinished by Friday, I'd take my business elsewhere. You have to be firm with these people. These people. This guy was talking about boat maintenance workers like he was a plantation owner discussing the help, and Clara was eating it up like it was the most fascinating conversation in human history. I looked down at my sculpture, now safely wrapped in its towel, and then back at Clara giggling at yacht stories. The contrast was almost poetic. Here I was, holding something I'd created with my own 2 hands, something that represented actual effort and thought and care, while she was drooling over a guy whose biggest accomplishment today was probably choosing between salmon and tuna for lunch on his boat. Both involve fish, real tough decision there, Bryce. But you know what? I wasn't even angry anymore. Somewhere between fishing my artwork out of the garbage and listening to marina management tips from Captain Abs, I'd crossed over into this weird zen state of not giving a damn. It was liberating, honestly, like when you're so tired that you become wide awake, or so hungry that you stop feeling hungry. I'd reached peak emotional capacity, and my brain had just decided to check out for a bit. I quietly grabbed my keys from the hook by the door, picked up my towel-wrapped sculpture, and headed toward the garage. Clara didn't even notice. She was too busy asking Bryce about his abs routine, because apparently that was a conversation they were having now, in my living room, on my 10-year anniversary. Sophie glanced up from her phone for half a second, made eye contact with me, and then immediately looked away. At the time, I thought she was just being polite, throwing out one of those vague, encouraging statements that people say when they don't want to be rude but also don't want to commit to anything. But now, sitting in my truck with my trash-rescued masterpiece riding shotgun, those words came back to me with crystal clarity. Bring me something breathtaking. Well, here it was. Granted, it currently smelled faintly of guacamole and had spent quality time with coffee grounds, but breathtaking nonetheless. The fact that it had been deemed worthless by the person whose opinion I'd valued most only made me more determined to prove that assessment wrong. I started the truck, and as I backed out of the driveway, I could see through the living room window Clara still on her FaceTime date, probably planning her next yacht adventure while sitting on the couch we'd bought together 7 years ago from IKEA. The couch I'd assembled while she supervised and criticized my Allen wrench technique. The couch that had cost us 3 hours, 2 arguments, and 1 missing bolt that we never found. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted designer labels and luxury brands. Wanted a man who could buy his way into her heart with pretty things that came from stores with names she could drop at brunch. But what she'd thrown away was something you couldn't buy in any store, something that represented time and effort and actual human emotion, concepts that apparently weren't valuable anymore in the Clara economy. As I drove toward downtown, the sculpture secured safely beside me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. Not the obligatory purpose of being a husband or a father or a guy who shows up to his job every day. Real purpose. The kind that makes your chest feel tight and your hands grip the steering wheel a little harder. I was going to show this piece to Lillian Albright, and whatever happened next, at least I'd know I tried. At least I'd know that one person with actual taste and knowledge would see what I'd created and judge it on its merits, not on whether it came in a Cartier box. The city lights reflected off my windshield as I headed toward the gallery district, and for the first time that night, hell, for the first time in months, I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a everything's fine smile, but a genuine, slightly manic smile of a man who'd just decided to bet on himself. Destination: Albright Gallery. Mission: prove that Handmade isn't junk. Status: smelling like Mexican food, but determined as hell. The Albright Gallery sat on 5th Street like a sophisticated lady at a dive bar, completely out of place, but somehow making everything around it look worse by comparison. The building was all glass and clean lines, with those fancy spotlights that made everything inside look like it belonged in a museum or a really pretentious Instagram post. I pulled up to the curb, my beat-up pickup truck looking absolutely ridiculous next to the Tesla and Mercedes parked nearby. And for a second I questioned my entire plan. What was I doing here? I was a guy who built stuff in his garage, not some fancy artist with a beret and strong opinions about postmodernism. But then I remembered the sound of my sculpture hitting that trash can, and suddenly I didn't care how out of place I looked. I grabbed my towel-wrapped masterpiece and walked up to the gallery entrance, which had those heavy glass doors that probably cost more than my truck. Through the window, I could see Lillian Albright herself, standing near a marble sculpture that looked like someone had sneezed and accidentally created art. She was in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in this elegant bun that screamed, "I have taste, and you probably don't," wearing all black like she was either very sophisticated or heading to a really upscale funeral. The woman had this presence about her. The kind of person who could look at a painting and tell you it was garbage or genius with equal conviction, and you'd believe her either way. The little bell above the door chimed as I walked in, and she looked up from whatever paperwork she was reviewing. Her eyes went from my face to the towel bundle in my arms, and one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised about half an inch. "Mr. Mercer," she said, remembering my name from 6 months ago, which honestly shocked me. "This is unexpected. We're technically closed, but I saw your truck pull up." Of course she did. My truck was probably visible from space, especially parked next to the luxury vehicles of people who actually belonged here. "Ms. Albright," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "You told me to bring you something breathtaking when I created it." Well, I created it. And then my wife threw it in the trash. But before that, it was breathtaking, and I'm pretty sure it still is, despite its recent journey through my garbage can. Why did I say that? Why did I immediately lead with the trash can story? This is why I don't go to parties. I have the social skills of a confused golden retriever. But instead of looking at me like I'd lost my mind, which would have been fair, she just smiled. Not a polite smile, but a genuine, amused smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "Well, now I'm intrigued," she said, setting down her papers and gesturing toward the examination table near the back of the gallery. "Let's see what was worthy of garbage can exile." I carefully unwrapped the sculpture, peeling back the towel like I was revealing a sacred artifact, which in my mind it kind of was. The gallery's lighting hit it immediately, and I swear the thing seemed to glow. All that walnut grain I'd spent weeks selecting, the way the wood curved and flowed like water frozen in time, the intricate Celtic knot with our initials that now felt more ironic than romantic, it all came together under those professional lights in a way my workshop's fluorescent tubes could never achieve. Lillian went completely silent. Not uncomfortable silence, but that focused, intense silence of someone actually seeing something. She moved closer, and I watched as she ran her fingers over the grain with the kind of reverence usually 6 figures. I repeated, my voice coming out higher than I intended. For something that spent the night with coffee grounds and what I'm pretty sure was expired hummus? I was still stuck on the trash can thing. Apparently, trauma has a way of fixating on specific details. Mine just happened to be garbage-related. 6 figures, she confirmed, nodding slowly. This is modern organic minimalism, pure art. The way you've manipulated the wood grain to flow with the design rather than against it, the structural integrity combined with aesthetic beauty, the symbolism of the Celtic not representing unity, while the overall piece suggests separation and longing. She kept talking, using words I barely understood, but that sounded really impressive and expensive. Something about juxtaposition and contemporary craftsmanship and marketability in the current climate. I just stood there, trying to do mental math and failing spectacularly. 6 figures meant at least $100,000. Maybe more. For something Clara had called junk. For something that had taken me 200 hours, 3 broken drill bits, and 1 singed eyebrow. The math was suddenly looking a lot better on my end. That was $500 an hour if it sold for the minimum. My day job paid me $35 an hour to build custom cabinets for people who mostly just complained about the price. I'll handle everything, Lillian continued, already moving into business mode with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Window display, insurance, auction listing. I have collectors who specifically look for pieces like this, organic, meaningful, with a story. She paused, giving me a sly smile. And trust me, the story of a man whose wife threw away a 6-figure piece of art because she wanted a bracelet? That's marketing gold. People eat that stuff up. It's romantic and tragic and has a beautiful screw-you energy that the art world absolutely loves. Wait, she wanted to use my humiliation as a selling point? My marriage falling apart was going to be part of the gallery description? I should have been offended, should have felt like my privacy was being invaded, but you know what? I didn't care. Not even a little bit. If my pain and Clara's terrible judgment could be converted into cold hard cash, then by all means, put it on a billboard. Skywrite it. Take out a Super Bowl ad for all I care. Leave it with me, she said, and it wasn't really a question. This woman was used to getting what she wanted, and right now she wanted my sculpture in her gallery. I'll have contracts drawn up tomorrow, standard gallery representation agreement. We take 30% commission, you get the rest. Insurance covers it from the moment it leaves your hands. We'll photograph it, catalog it, and I'm thinking we feature it in the front window for at least 2 weeks before the auction. Build up some buzz, get people talking. 30% seemed like a lot until I did the math and realized that 70% of 6 figures was still way more money than I'd ever made from woodworking. Hell, it was more money than I'd made from anything, ever. My entire financial existence up until this moment had been about budgets and coupons and figuring out how to make $50 stretch until next payday. The concept of having real money, life-changing money, was so foreign that my brain kept trying to reject it like a bad organ transplant. I nodded, trying to look like I totally expected this outcome, like I walked into fancy galleries and sold 6-figure art pieces all the time. Sounds good, I said, going for casual and probably landing somewhere around constipated. Let's do it. Inside, my inner broke carpenter, the one who'd been clipping coupons and buying the store-brand cereal for a decade, just straight up fainted. Just collapsed on the floor of my consciousness and started making snow angels in imaginary money. Lillian smiled, the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly what was going through my head and found it adorable in a look at the peasant discovering wealth kind of way. Wonderful. I'll call you tomorrow with the details. For now, leave this beauty with me. I promise she's in good hands. She gestured to the sculpture with genuine affection, like it was a living thing she was adopting rather than an inanimate object she was preparing to sell. I took one last look at my creation, sitting there on her fancy examination table under perfect lighting, finally being appreciated by someone who understood its value. For months of work, one marriage-ending argument, and a brief stint as garbage had led to this moment. Sometimes life has a weird sense of humor, you know? Sometimes the trash can is actually the first step toward treasure. Take care of her, I said, feeling only slightly ridiculous for referring to a wooden box as her. But after everything we'd been through together, me and this sculpture, we'd bonded. We were trauma survivors together, refugees from the same disaster zone called my marriage. I will, Lillian promised, and somehow I believed her. This woman looked at my art and saw value. Real, actual, six-figure value, which was approximately 6 figures more than my wife had seen. But who's counting? Me. Still me. Always counting. I walked out of that gallery feeling like I was floating, my footsteps not quite connecting with the ground in any meaningful way. The bell chimed again as I left, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at my reflection in the gallery window. Same guy who'd walked in 10 minutes ago, but somehow completely different. Same ratty jeans and work boots, but now they belonged to a guy whose art was about to be displayed in a legitimate gallery with insurance and everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Where are you? You just left." I looked at the message, then at the gallery, then back at the message. "Busy," I typed back. "Building an empire while you build a relationship with Bryce's abs. Priorities." I hit send before I could second guess it, because apparently finding out your art is worth 6 figures gives you a confidence boost that makes you temporarily brave. Or stupid. With me, it's usually a coin flip. 2 days later, I was in my workshop pretending to be productive while actually just staring at my phone like a teenager waiting for their crush to text back. Lillian had said she'd get the sculpture displayed and send me photos, but part of me, the pessimistic part that had been carefully cultivated over 10 years of marriage, was convinced that she'd wake up, realize the piece was actually garbage like Clara had said, and quietly donate it to Goodwill. That's just how my luck usually worked. Build up hope, watch it crash, repeat until dead inside. But then my phone buzzed, and there it was, a text from Lillian with 3 photo attachments. My hands were literally shaking as I opened the first one, which is ridiculous because I'm a grown man and it's just a picture, but apparently my nervous system didn't get that memo. The image loaded, and I swear I stopped breathing for a solid 5 seconds. My sculpture, my junk, was sitting in the front window of the Albright Gallery, perfectly positioned under what had to be professionally designed lighting that made it look like it was glowing with some kind of holy aura. The walnut grain seemed to shimmer under those lights, every curve and detail highlighted in a way that made it look like something you'd see in a museum next to a velvet rope and a security guard named Frank who takes his job way too seriously. And there, right underneath it on a sleek little gold plaque that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, were the words that made my heart do this weird skippy thing. Handcrafted resonance. $150,000. $150,000. They'd put a price on it that was somehow even more insane than the 6 figures estimate. That was a house down payment. That was a new truck. That was Sophie's college fund, and then some. That was, I can finally replace my workshop table saw that's been making that concerning grinding noise for 2 years money. That was freedom, spelled out in 6 beautiful digits. I sat there in my workshop, surrounded by sawdust and half-finished projects, staring at this picture of my creation being treated like actual art, and I felt this weird emotional cocktail of pride, vindication, and the overwhelming urge to screenshot this and send it to Clara with a message that was 100% petty and 0% mature. Guess which option I chose? If you guessed, be the bigger person, you don't know me at all. But before I could compose the perfect sarcastic text, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from my buddy Jake. "Dude, is that your piece in Albright's window? Just walk by with Amy. That price tag is insane." Then another buzz, this time from my cousin Michelle. Excuse me, are you secretly rich and just never told the family?" And then another from someone I hadn't talked to in 3 years. "Saw your sculpture downtown. Congrats, man." Apparently, word traveled fast in this city. The Albright Gallery was located on 5th Street, right in the heart of downtown, where people actually walked around and did things like window shopping and having a social life. It was basically the perfect location for everyone and their mother to see my work, including, and this is where it gets good, the brunch place 2 blocks away where Clara liked to have her weekly brunches with Bryce and Sophie. I didn't have to wait long for that particular shoe to drop. Approximately 10 minutes after Jake's text, my phone lit up with Clara's name. And let me tell you, the preview of her message was chef's kiss beautiful. "What the hell is your trash doing in Albright's window?" I opened the full message, which was somehow even better than the preview suggested. "What the hell is your trash doing in Albright's window? Everyone is talking about it. Bryce just asked me if you're some kind of famous artist now. This is embarrassing. Why didn't you tell me you were going to do this? We should talk about this. That piece was for us, for our anniversary. And now it's in a public window with a ridiculous price tag. People are going to think you're trying to make me look bad. Oh, the irony. The delicious, mouth-watering irony of Clara being embarrassed by the thing she'd literally thrown in the garbage. The thing she'd called junk was now making her uncomfortable because other people thought it was valuable. Because the same people she performed for at brunch, the ones she tried to impress with her designer bags and name-dropping, were now looking at something I created and being impressed. The cognitive dissonance must have been killing her. I read her message 3 times, savoring each word like a fine wine or an expensive cheese that I could now actually afford. Then I crafted my response with the care and precision I usually reserve for my woodworking. It's not trash anymore. It's handmade luxury. Like Bryce, but actually useful. Send. No takebacks. No regrets. Just pure, distilled pettiness in text form. The 3 little dots appeared immediately, indicating she was typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. This happened about 4 times, which meant she was writing responses and deleting them, probably trying to find the right combination of words that would make me feel guilty while also not admitting she'd been wrong. It's a delicate balance, and Clara had always been pretty good at walking that tightrope. But apparently, my Bryce comment had thrown her off her game. Finally, a message came through. This isn't funny. You're making me look bad in front of people. Sophie is upset. Everyone keeps asking her about it. Sophie was upset? The same Sophie who'd giggled about how I couldn't compete with Bryce's designer gifts? The same Sophie who'd watched her mother throw my gift in the trash and hadn't said a word? Now she was upset because people were paying attention to me instead of whatever drama was happening in her TikTok feed. The kid was 15, everything upset her. Last week she was upset because we were out of the specific brand of yogurt she liked. Perspective, thy name is not teenager. But I didn't type any of that because I'm not a complete monster, despite how satisfying it would have been. Instead, I just sent. Then I muted her. Okay, I didn't actually type that last part. I just muted her. Because priorities, right? I had better things to do than engage in a text argument with someone who'd spent the last 10 years making me feel like I wasn't enough. My sculpture was in a gallery window with a $150,000 price tag, and Clara was upset that it made her look bad? That was a her problem, not a me problem. I took a screenshot of the gallery photo and set it as my phone's wallpaper, which was either a power move or incredibly sad, depending on your perspective. Then I forwarded the picture to my mom with the message. Remember when you said I should have gotten a real job instead of woodworking? This is in a gallery downtown. $150,000. Was I being petty to my own mother? Yes. Did it feel amazing anyway? Also yes. She'd spent years telling me that craftsmanship was a dying art, and I should have gone into something practical like accounting or dental hygiene. And now I had photographic proof that she was wrong. My phone kept buzzing with messages from people I hadn't heard from in months or years, all of them suddenly very interested in my art career. It was like that thing that happens when you get engaged or have a baby. People come out of the woodwork to congratulate you and act like they've been there all along. Where were these people when I was working 60-hour weeks trying to make ends meet? Where were they when Clara was slowly dismantling my self-esteem one sigh at a time? But now that there was a fancy price tag involved, suddenly everyone wanted to be supportive. I'm not bitter about it. Okay, I'm a little bitter about it. But mostly I was just amused by how quickly perception could change. 2 days ago, I was the guy whose wife had a boyfriend and threw his anniversary gift in the trash. Today, I was the guy with art in the Albright Gallery. Same person, same sculpture, completely different narrative. It was like watching one of those home makeover shows where they reveal the transformation, except instead of a house, it was my entire life. Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. Hi, this is Darren Cho from the Arts and Culture section of the Tribune. We'd love to do a feature on you and your work. Would you be available for an interview? The Tribune, the actual newspaper that people read and shared and quoted. They wanted to interview me about my art. Me, the guy who'd spent the morning trying to fix a wobbly workbench and eating cereal straight from the box because I couldn't be bothered to find a clean bowl. I stared at that message for a solid minute, trying to figure out if it was real or if someone was pranking me. But the number looked legitimate, and when I Googled Darren Cho, he was actually a real arts journalist with a real profile picture and everything. This was happening. This was actually happening. Yes, I typed back, trying to sound professional and not like someone who was internally screaming. I'd be happy to do an interview. When were you thinking? There. Casual. Professional. Like I did newspaper interviews all the time, and this was just another Tuesday. His response came back almost immediately. How about tomorrow afternoon? We could meet at the gallery, get some photos of you with the piece. Our photographer is already scheduled to shoot it. They were sending a photographer. A real photographer, not just someone's cousin with an iPhone. This was getting more real by the second, and I was starting to feel that weird combination of excited and nauseous that usually preceded either really good things or spectacular disasters. I confirmed the time and sat back in my workshop chair, which squeaked in that way that suggested it was about 3 weeks away from completely falling apart. My life was changing. Like, actually, dramatically changing, and all because I'd refused to let my marriage-ending humiliation be the final word on something I'd created. All because I'd picked my sculpture out of the trash and driven it to someone who could see its value. My phone buzzed again. Clara, we need to talk about this properly. Face to face. This affects the whole family. I looked at that message, then at my wallpaper showing my sculpture in the gallery window, then back at the message. No thanks, I typed. I'm busy building a career. You're busy building a relationship with someone who owns a yacht. Let's both focus on our projects. And then, and this is the part I'm most proud of, I actually did mute her this time. Just pressed that little button and watched her name fade into the filtered messages folder where it belonged. It felt like deleting a spam email or unsubscribing from a newsletter you never wanted in the first place. Liberating. Final. Right. I stood up, brushed the sawdust off my jeans, and looked around my workshop with new eyes. This space, this craft, this thing Clara had always treated like a hobby I'd eventually grow out of, it was legitimate. It was valuable. It was worth something, which meant by extension, I was worth something. The sculpture in the window wasn't just art. It was proof. Proof that I'd been right to keep creating, right to keep believing in what I could do with my hands and my vision. Proof that Clara's opinion wasn't fact, just one person's spectacularly bad judgment. And honestly, that felt better than any anniversary gift I could have received. By the time I pulled into my driveway that evening, I knew something was up. Call it intuition, call it pattern recognition from 10 years of marriage, or call it the fact that Clara was literally standing on the front porch like a sentry guard waiting to interrogate prisoners of war. She had that stance, you know the one, arms crossed, hip cocked to one side, wearing what I called her battle outfit, the designer jeans that cost more than my monthly insurance payment, and that cream-colored sweater that she only wore when she needed to look simultaneously approachable and intimidating. It was her, I'm reasonable but also right, uniform, and she deployed it many times over the years with varying degrees of success. I sat in my truck for a moment, debating whether I could just live there now. The truck had heat, a radio, and didn't judge my life choices. That was more than I could say for the woman currently staring at me through the windshield with the intensity of a hawk spotting a particularly stupid mouse. But eventually, I had to face the music, or in this case, face the furious museum visitor who was absolutely not happy about recent developments in the art world. So this is your plan? She snapped before I'd even made it halfway up the walkway. No, hello. No. How was your day? Just straight into the accusation phase of our interaction. Very efficient. I almost appreciated it. Embarrass me? Make me look like some kind of villain who doesn't appreciate art? Everyone at brunch was talking about it. Everyone. Karen showed me the photo on her phone like I didn't know it existed. Do you know how humiliating that was? I stopped walking and just looked at her for a moment, really looked at her. This woman who I'd spent a decade trying to please, trying to be enough for, trying to prove my worth to. She was standing here, on our anniversary week, complaining that I'd embarrassed her. Not that she'd hurt me. Not that she'd thrown away something I'd spent months creating. Not that she'd been conducting a whole relationship with Captain Abs while still wearing her wedding ring. No, the problem was that I'd embarrassed her at brunch. Priorities. No, I said, keeping my voice level and calm in a way that I knew would irritate her more than yelling ever could. My plan was to give you something from the heart. The embarrassment part was your idea. You threw it in the trash, remember? I just picked it up and took it somewhere people would appreciate it. Not my fault it turned out to be worth more than your boyfriend's boat payment. Her face did this interesting color-changing thing, going from pale to pink to almost red in the span of about 3 seconds. It was like watching a time-lapse of a sunset, except angry and on a person. That's not fair, she said. And I almost laughed because suddenly fairness was a concern. Now, after everything, but then something shifted in her expression. The anger melted away like ice cream on a hot sidewalk, replaced by something softer, more calculated. I'd seen this transition before. It was her pivoting strategy, the one she used when the direct approach wasn't working. Time to try manipulation through sweetness. Look, she said, her voice dropping into that gentle tone she used to use when we were dating, back when I still thought that tone was genuine affection and not just a tool in her arsenal. Maybe I overreacted. It's actually beautiful. I can see that now. Everyone can see that now. Now, I repeated, emphasizing the word. You can see that now? After a gallery put a price tag on it. After people you want to impress told you it was valuable. Funny how that works. She waved her hand dismissively, like my point was a fly she could just shoo away. Details. The important thing is that it's worth a lot of money. That's exciting. That's great news for us. We should split the sale money, right? It was our anniversary gift, after all. Community property and everything. She smiled, and it was supposed to be warm and inviting, but it reminded me more of a shark that had just spotted a swimmer with a cramp. I stared at her. Just stared. Because the audacity, the sheer, unfiltered, Olympic-level audacity of this woman was actually impressive in its own terrible way. Split? I asked, wanting to make sure I'd heard correctly. Clara, you threw it out. You literally called it junk and threw it in the trash, next to leftover Mexican food. That's like asking for a cut of the lottery ticket you tore in half and flushed down the toilet. But I'm your wife, she said, like that was supposed to mean something after everything. Like that title still carried weight when she'd been the one to strip it of all meaning. We're supposed to share things. For better or worse, remember? Oh, I remember, I said. I remember all of it. I remember the worst part very clearly. It's been pretty much exclusively worse for about 3 years now. But you know what I don't remember? You sharing Bryce with me. How's that working out, by the way? Does he know you're here trying to get money from the husband you've been cheating on? Or is that going to be a fun surprise for later? The front door opened, and Sophie peeked out, her teenage face showing that specific expression kids get when their parents are fighting, part embarrassed, part fascinated, entirely uncomfortable. Dad, are you rich now? She asked, cutting through the tension with the kind of blunt honesty only teenagers can pull off. I looked at my daughter, this kid who'd laughed at me days ago, who'd sided with her mother about the boyfriend, who'd been part of my humiliation. And you know what? She was still my kid, still 15 and confused and trying to navigate a family that was falling apart. I couldn't be mad at her the way I was mad at Clara. Sophie was a victim of this mess too, even if she didn't realize it yet. Not yet, kiddo, I said, softening my voice. But rich in satisfaction? Oh, absolutely. Rich in knowing that I was right, and everyone who doubted me was wrong? Definitely. Rich enough to finally understand my own worth? 100%. Sophie nodded slowly, processing this. Mom's friends keep texting her about it. Mrs. Patterson said it was a stunning piece of contemporary art and asked if she could commission you to make something for her entryway. She glanced at Clara, then back at me. Mom's been on the phone all day trying to do damage control. Damage control, I repeated, savoring the phrase. That's what we're calling it. Not, oh my God, I made a horrible mistake, or I can't believe I threw away something so valuable. Just damage control? Like I'm a PR crisis instead of her husband who she completely disrespected. Clara's gentle mask slipped for just a second, annoyance flashing across her face before she could control it. You're being dramatic. I made a mistake. I'm trying to apologize and move forward. Isn't that what you always wanted? For me to acknowledge your work. I wanted you to acknowledge it when it mattered, I said. I wanted you to see the value in something I created before someone else told you it had value. I wanted you to appreciate the thought and effort, not the price tag. But sure, now that there's money involved, now that your friends are impressed, suddenly you can see it. That's not appreciation, Clara. That's opportunism wearing an apology costume. A car pulled up to the curb, a BMW that I didn't recognize, but that had Bryce's car written all over it in invisible but obvious letters. Sure enough, Captain Abs himself emerged from the driver's seat, all tan and teeth and the kind of confidence that comes from never having experienced real hardship. He was wearing boat shoes. Of course he was wearing boat shoes. Probably had a sweater tied around his shoulders at home. Everything okay here? He called out. like he was some kind of hero arriving to save the day, completely oblivious to the fact that he was part of the problem. Or maybe not oblivious. Maybe he just didn't care. Hard to tell with people who own yachts. Everything's fine, Clara said quickly, shooting him a look that clearly meant stay in the car. But Bryce apparently wasn't great at reading social cues because he started walking up the driveway anyway. You must be the artist, he said, extending his hand toward me with a smile that was probably supposed to be friendly but came across as condescending. Clara told me about your piece. Very impressive. I dabble in collecting myself, mostly maritime art, obviously, but I can appreciate craftsmanship when I see it. I looked at his extended hand like it was a dead fish, which honestly wasn't that far off. Obviously, I said, not taking it. Maritime art for the maritime man. Very on brand. Did you sail here, or does the BMW also float? His smile faltered just a bit, confusion crossing his face like he wasn't quite sure if I was joking or insulting him. Join the club, Bryce. I wasn't entirely sure myself. It's actually amphibious, he said, and I genuinely could not tell if he was serious or if he'd just made a joke. This man was an enigma, and not in an interesting way. Bryce, maybe you should wait in the car, Clara said, her voice tight with the kind of tension that suggested this evening was not going according to her plan. Good. Plans were overrated anyway. I'd had a plan for my 10th anniversary, and look how that turned out. I'm just trying to help, Bryce said, looking wounded in that way men who've never really struggled tend to look when things don't go smoothly. I think we could all benefit from a calm conversation about this. Oh, you think that, do you? I asked, turning my full attention to him. You think you should be part of a conversation about my marriage and my art? That's fascinating. Tell me, does your yacht have a degree in marriage counseling, or are you just naturally this delusional about your role in other people's lives? Sophie snorted from the doorway, then tried to cover it with a cough. Even she could see how ridiculous this situation had become. Here we were, me, my wife, her boyfriend, and our teenage daughter, all standing in our driveway discussing a sculpture that had gone from trash to treasure in less than a week. If someone had told me this was how my anniversary would play out, I would have suggested they lay off the heavy medication. You know what? I said, looking between Clara and Bryce like they were a disappointing art installation. Keep the drama. Keep the boat stories. Keep whatever fantasy you're building together. But that sculpture? That money? That success? That's mine. I built it, I survived it being trashed, and I'm going to enjoy every single moment of watching it succeed. You had your chance to be part of something meaningful, Clara. You chose to throw it away. Now you get to watch from the outside while I figure out what I'm worth without you. I walked past all of them, headed for the door where Sophie was still standing. Come on, kiddo, I said. Let's order pizza and watch something ridiculous. I'm thinking action movies with terrible dialogue and physics that make no sense. Can we get the good pizza? She asked. Not the cheap stuff? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had since this whole conversation started. Kid, we can get the fancy pizza with the truffle oil and the arugula that costs $40 and tastes like expensive grass clippings. We can afford it now. That sounds terrible, she said. It absolutely is, I agreed. But it's expensive terrible, which is apparently what matters these days. We went inside, leaving Clara and Bryce standing in the driveway, probably trying to figure out their next move. Through the window, I could see them talking, Clara gesturing animatedly, while Bryce nodded with that serious expression people get when they're pretending to understand something complex. My phone buzzed. Clara, this conversation isn't over. Me, yes it is. The only thing that's not over is my career. That's just getting started. You wanted designer gifts? Well, congratulations. I'm about to become one. Enjoy brunch. Sophie looked over at me from where she was pulling up the pizza menu on her phone. Dad, yeah. I'm sorry, I laughed. About the gift. It wasn't funny. I walked over and hugged her, because at the end of the day, she was still my kid, still learning, still figuring out how to be a decent human in a complicated world. It's okay. You're 15. Everything's funny when you're 15, even things that shouldn't be. I think it's cool, she said quietly. The sculpture. I looked at the pictures online. It's really beautiful. I didn't see it before, but I see it now. Now is better than never, I said, and I meant it. At least someone in this family was capable of growth. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that felt almost insulting in its cheerfulness. Bright sunshine, birds chirping like they were auditioning for a Disney movie, the whole works. I'd barely slept the night before, tossing and turning like a rotisserie chicken, my brain refusing to shut up about everything that could go wrong. What if nobody bid? What if Lillian had overestimated the value? What if the whole thing was just an elaborate prank, and I'd wake up to find out the art world was collectively laughing at the delusional carpenter who thought he was special? I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing my third cup of coffee and seriously considering a fourth, when my phone rang. Lillian's name flashed on the screen, and my heart immediately started doing that annoying thing where it forgets how to beat at a normal rhythm. I answered on the second ring, trying not to sound like I'd been sitting here waiting desperately for news like a teenager hoping their crush would text back. "It's sold," Lillian said, not even bothering with a greeting. Her voice had this quality of barely contained excitement, like she was trying to be professional but was also internally screaming. Full asking price. $150,000. I nearly dropped my coffee. Actually nearly dropped it. Had to do that awkward fumble where you're trying to keep liquid from spilling while also processing information that your brain is convinced can't possibly be real. The mug hit the table harder than I intended, coffee sloshing over the side and creating a small brown puddle that I just stared at because my motor functions had apparently taken a vacation. Say that again. I managed, my voice coming out weird and strangled like I was being choked by my own disbelief. $150,000, she repeated, slower this time, enunciating each word like she was talking to someone who'd just suffered a minor head injury. Which, emotionally, wasn't that far off. A private collector from Seattle. She saw the window display, came in for the auction preview yesterday, and made an immediate offer for the full asking price. Said she'd never seen organic minimalism executed with such raw emotional honesty. Her words, not mine, though I happen to agree. Raw emotional honesty. That was one way to describe pouring your heart into something only to have it literally trashed by the person you made it for. I guess heartbreak does make for good art. All those tortured artists throughout history were onto something. Maybe I should thank Clara for the trauma. Kidding. Absolutely kidding. I'd rather eat my own sawdust. After gallery commission, your cut is $105,000, Lillian continued, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. Wire transfer should hit your account by Tuesday. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. You're officially a successful artist. $105,000. I tried to do the math on what that meant, but my brain had apparently forgotten how numbers worked. That was more than I made in 2 years at my day job. That was more than I'd ever had in my bank account at one time in my entire life. That was, I can actually breathe for the first time in a decade money. That was, maybe I don't have to live paycheck to paycheck until I die money. I'm going to need you to repeat that one more time, I said, because apparently I'd turned into a person who needed constant confirmation that good things were actually happening. Just so I know I'm not having some kind of breakdown and imagining this entire conversation. She laughed, that genuine, warm laugh of someone who genuinely enjoyed their job and got satisfaction from making other people's dreams come true. It's real. Very real. Check your email. I just sent you all the documentation. Sales agreement, transfer details, authentication certificates. You'll want to save all of this for tax purposes. Speaking of which, you should probably talk to an accountant. This is going to affect your tax situation pretty significantly. Tax problems. I was going to have tax problems because I made too much money. What a beautiful, weird, completely surreal problem to have. I'll figure that out, I said, still not entirely convinced this wasn't an elaborate hallucination brought on by too much coffee and not enough sleep. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you for seeing something in my work when everyone else saw trash. Everyone else was wrong, she said simply. It happens more than you'd think in this industry. Some of the most valuable art started out misunderstood or underappreciated. You're in good company. We said our goodbyes, and I just sat there for a minute, staring at my phone like it might suddenly admit this was all a joke. But it didn't. The call log showed Lillian's number. My email notification showed a new message with the subject line sculpture sale, final documentation. This was happening. This had happened. Past tense. Done deal. I opened my banking app, even though I knew the money wouldn't be there until Tuesday, just to look at my current balance. $347.82. By Tuesday, that number was going to have 5 more digits in front of it. The thought was so absurd that I actually laughed out loud, sitting alone in my kitchen like a crazy person, just laughing at my phone and my coffee and the general absurdity of life. My first thought, and I'm not proud of this, but I'm being honest here, was to text Clara, not to gloat. Exactly, though there would definitely be some gloating involved. More to show her, definitively, that she'd been wrong. That her judgment of my work had been catastrophically incorrect. That the thing she'd thrown away was worth more than her designer handbag collection combined. But then I remembered that I'd muted her, and also that I was trying to be a better person than the petty impulses screaming in my head. Instead, I made a list. An actual, physical list on paper because I'm old-fashioned that way, and there's something satisfying about writing things down with an actual pen. First priority, mortgage. We'd been living with this thing hanging over our heads for 8 years, never quite able to make extra payments, always just scraping by with the minimum. I pulled up the mortgage account online, $67,000 remaining. I could pay that off entirely and still have plenty left over. No more monthly payments. No more anxiety about missing a payment if work got slow. Just done. Finished. Free. I sat there looking at that number, at the power I suddenly had to just erase this debt that had been a constant source of stress, and felt something shift in my chest. This was real freedom. Not the abstract concept, but the actual, tangible ability to make choices without fear. The ability to say no to things I didn't want to do. The ability to invest in my craft without worrying about whether I could afford groceries that week. Second priority, you can say you knew me when I was tragically uncool and still like me anyway. I replied, that's worth more. Another text came through, this time from my mom. Your sister showed me the article in the Tribune. Very proud of you, honey. Sorry about what I said about getting a real job. Turns out you had one all along. The Tribune article. I'd almost forgotten about that. The interview with Darren Cho had run 2 days ago, and apparently people were actually reading it. The headline had been something like, From Heartbreak to High Art. Local craftsman's journey to gallery success, which was a bit dramatic but not inaccurate. They'd included photos of the sculpture, of me in my workshop looking ruggedly artistic, their description, not mine, and had even quoted Clara saying, I always knew he was talented, which was such revisionist history it qualified as fiction. I pulled up the article on my phone and read through it again, seeing it with new eyes now that I knew the sculpture had actually sold. Darren had done a good job. Made me sound thoughtful and intentional rather than heartbroken and desperate. He'd focused on the craftsmanship, the symbolism, the emotional resonance of the piece. And at the very end, he'd included that bit about it being originally intended as an anniversary gift, though sometimes, he'd written, the greatest gifts we give are the ones we ultimately give to ourselves. Pretentious? Maybe a little. Accurate? Painfully so. I forwarded the article to Sophie with the message. In case you want to show your friends that your dad is slightly less embarrassing than you thought. Her response came back quickly. Dad, this is actually really cool. Can I show my art teacher? She's always talking about finding your voice through your work and stuff. This is like a real example. Show whoever you want, kiddo. Just maybe don't show mom. She's had a rough week. 3 dots appeared, then, she's been crying a lot. Bryce came over last night, and they had a fight. Something about him not being ready for this level of drama. Whatever that means. I felt a complicated mix of emotions reading that. Part of me, the petty part that I was trying to suppress, felt satisfied that Clara's perfect relationship with Captain Abs wasn't so perfect after all. But another part, the part that had loved her for 10 years and still remembered why, felt bad that she was hurting. Even if she'd caused most of her own problems, even if she'd hurt me first and worse, I wasn't built to enjoy other people's pain. Unfortunately. Sorry to hear that. I typed back, and I actually meant it. You doing okay? Yeah. It's kind of nice when you and mom aren't fighting. The house feels calmer. That hit me harder than I expected. Of course she was relieved. She'd been living in a war zone disguised as a family home for years. Kids notice everything, even when you think you're hiding it. Especially when you think you're hiding it. Going to stay calm, I promised. No more fighting. Just moving forward. And I meant that too. The money changed things, sure, but more than that, it changed my perspective. I didn't need to fight with Clara anymore. Didn't need to prove anything to her or convince her of my worth. The art world had done that for me. The collector from Seattle who'd paid $150,000 for my work had done that. All those people reading the Tribune article and texting me congratulations had done that. I was done being the guy who got roasted at his own anniversary dinner. Done being the guy whose wife preferred her boyfriend's yacht stories to his handmade gifts. Done being the guy who worked 60-hour weeks and still felt like he wasn't doing enough. I was officially the guy who'd turned trash into treasure, literally and metaphorically. And that guy? He was going to be just fine. Better than fine, actually. He was going to be successful. On his own terms. With his own hands. And no amount of designer bracelets could compete with that. Word spread through town like wildfire, except faster and more annoying because it involved social media. Apparently, nothing gets people more excited than a good underdog story combined with public humiliation of someone they secretly disliked. Within 48 hours of the Tribune article going live, I'd gone from that carpenter guy to the artisan genius who proved his ex-wife wrong. It was like watching myself become a meme in real time. Except the meme was my actual life, and I couldn't decide if that was awesome or terrifying. My Instagram, which I'd barely used except to post the occasional picture of a bookshelf I'd built or Sophie at her school events, suddenly had notifications coming in so fast my phone sounded like a slot machine hitting jackpot. People I hadn't talked to since high school were sliding into my DMs with messages like, "Always knew you'd make it big," and "Remember that time in wood shop?" No, Brad, I don't remember, because you spent most of wood shop trying to set things on fire, and I spent it actually learning. But sure, we were totally best friends, absolutely. The local news channel, Channel 7, the one that usually covered important breaking stories like local cat stuck in tree, and is your coffee maker trying to kill you? Reached out wanting to do a segment. They sent a reporter named Ashley who looked about 22 and had the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she'd been promised this would lead to bigger stories. Maybe it would. Maybe my life was her ticket to covering actual news instead of homicidal appliances. So tell me, Ashley said, sitting across from me in my workshop with a cameraman named Dave who looked perpetually bored. When did you first realize your art had real value? She held the microphone toward me with the intensity of someone conducting a presidential interview, and I had to suppress the urge to laugh because the answer was about 5 minutes after my wife threw it in the garbage, but that felt too bitter for daytime television. I think art always has value if it means something to the person creating it, I said instead, going for the inspirational angle. The financial value just means other people recognize that meaning too. But for me, the real value was in the process. In taking raw materials and transforming them into something that expressed what I was feeling. Look at me, sounding all philosophical and deep. If you'd told me 3 weeks ago that I'd be on TV talking about the emotional resonance of walnut grain, I would have suggested you seek professional help. But here we were. And your wife. Ashley started, leaning in like she was about to get the juicy gossip, but I cut her off. Ex-wife. I corrected, even though the divorce papers hadn't actually been filed yet. But they would be. That was happening. I'd already talked to a lawyer named Patterson who specialized in what he called high-asset divorces, which made me laugh because 3 weeks ago I had a high-asset pile of sawdust and dreams. We're separated. She's moving on with her life. I'm moving on with mine. That's all that needs to be said about that. Ashley looked slightly disappointed that I wasn't going to trash-talk Clara on camera, but she recovered quickly. Well, your work is certainly moving forward. I understand you've received several commission requests. That was an understatement. My email inbox looked like it had been attacked by wealthy people with too much disposable income and a sudden desperate need for handcrafted furniture. A guy from Connecticut wanted a dining table that could seat 12 and capture the essence of family. A woman from Portland needed a meditation cabinet that promoted spiritual alignment. Someone from New York just sent me a message that said, "Money is no object. Make me something amazing," which was both the best and most stressful commission request possible. I confirmed. It's been overwhelming, honestly. I'm just one guy with a workshop, not a factory. But I'm working on building a backlog of designs and figuring out what projects speak to me. I don't want to just chase the money. I want to create things that matter. Dave the cameraman actually looked up from his camera at that, raising an eyebrow like he was impressed or surprised or possibly just had an itch. Hard to tell with Dave. The interview wrapped up after about 20 more minutes of me trying to sound wise and Ashley trying to make my workshop look more artistic than place where wood goes to become other wood. They got some B-roll of me sanding a piece of cherry wood, which felt performative, but whatever. This was television. Everything was performative. After they left, I checked my phone and found a notification that made me genuinely laugh out loud. Clara had posted on Facebook. On her public, everyone can see this Facebook page, a photo of us from our wedding day with the caption, "Proud of my ex's talent." Some people are meant to shine, even if the timing wasn't right for us. Red heart. My ex. She'd actually written my ex, and then followed it with a heart emoji like that combination made any sense. Like you could claim ownership of someone while simultaneously acknowledging they were no longer yours. The mental gymnastics required for that post deserved a gold medal. I scrolled through the comments. Because I'm only human and humans are nosy creatures who enjoy watching drama unfold, especially when it's their own drama. Karen, from brunch, apparently, so classy of you to support him. Red heart. Linda somebody. Takes a strong woman to celebrate an ex's success. Bryce's comment, which he'd clearly been forced to write. Great guy, great artist. Thumbs up. And then, buried in the middle, a comment that made me actually laugh so hard I snorted. Jenny Martinez. Weren't you just posting about how handmade gifts were tacky? This was like 2 weeks ago. Oh, Jenny. Bless you, Jenny Martinez, whoever you are. Some hero we don't deserve, but definitely need. I couldn't help myself. I know I shouldn't have. I know it was petty, and I know it violated my promise to stay above the fray, but I commented anyway. X confirmed. Thanks for the support, though I think we both know the timing was perfect, just not in the way you expected. Raising hands. Then I screenshot the whole thing and sent it to Jake with the message. She called me her ex on Facebook. It's official. His response. Dude, she's trying to ride your coattails to relevance. Don't let her. Too late. Already commented. I'm petty and I've accepted it. Respect. Own your pettiness. It's called authenticity. I was still grinning at my phone when another notification popped up, this time from Lillian. Check your email. Another opportunity. The email was from a magazine called Artisan Living, one of those glossy publications that people kept in their living rooms to look cultured but never actually read. They wanted to do a full feature spread on me, my workshop, my process, my inspiration. 6 pages, professional photography, the works. They were calling it From Garbage to Gallery, the resurrection of handmade art in the digital age. Everyone was really leaning into the garbage angle. I was going to have to put that on my business cards at this rate. John Mercer, garbage artist, specializing in trash-to-treasure transformations. But underneath the sarcasm, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, pride. Real, genuine, uncomplicated pride in what I'd accomplished. Not pride in making someone else happy or meeting someone else's expectations, but pride in my own work, my own vision, my own stubborn refusal to let someone else's judgment define my worth. I responded to the magazine with a professional, I'd be honored to participate message, because apparently I was a professional now who participated in things rather than just a guy who made furniture in his garage while listening to classic rock and occasionally talking to himself. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize with a Seattle area code. I almost didn't answer, assuming it was another reporter or commission request that could wait, but something made me pick up. Mr. Mercer? A woman's voice, older, cultured, with that specific quality that suggested education and money. This is Margaret Chun. I'm the collector who purchased your sculpture. Oh, the woman who'd spent $150,000 on my heartbreak crystallized in walnut. The woman who'd validated everything I'd been trying to prove. Miss Chun, I said, trying to sound calm and collected rather than like I was internally freaking out. Thank you. Thank you for seeing value in the piece. It means more than you probably realize. I read the Tribune article, she said, and I wanted you to know, the piece is extraordinary, yes, but the story behind it is what made it truly valuable. Art that comes from genuine emotion, from real human experience, that's what transcends. That's what lasts. Your ex-wife did you a favor, though I'm sure it didn't feel like it at the time. It absolutely did not, I confirmed. But you're right. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep that humiliation private, to pretend it never happened. But a bigger part, the part that was tired of hiding and pretending, said yes. Said let people see the full journey, the failure and the success, the trash can and the triumph. You have my permission, I said. Tell the whole story. Maybe someone else going through something similar will see it and realize their worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to recognize it. Beautifully said. I'll send you photos once it's installed. And Mr. Mercer? Keep creating. The world needs more artists who aren't afraid to be vulnerable. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop surrounded by sawdust and half-finished projects and tools that I could finally afford to replace, and I felt something settle in my chest. This was real. This was happening. I wasn't just a guy whose wife threw away his gift. I was an artist whose work resonated with people, whose story mattered, whose craft had value beyond measure. I pulled up Facebook one more time, looked at Clara's post with its carefully crafted narrative of gracious support and amicable separation. Then I posted my own status, simple and direct. Sometimes you have to get thrown away to realize you were never garbage to begin with. Thanks to everyone who's supported my journey. The best is yet to come. Within minutes, the likes and comments started rolling in. Friends, family, strangers who'd read the article, people who'd seen the interview. All of them cheering for the underdog who'd somehow managed to turn his worst moment into his greatest victory. And somewhere, I knew Clara was seeing it. Seeing that I didn't need her validation anymore. Seeing that I'd built something real and lasting without her support. Seeing that the man she'd dismissed as irrelevant was becoming someone people actually admired. The internet had spoken, and it had chosen me. Take that, Bryce and your stupid yacht. My workshop transformed into a full studio faster than I could have imagined. New equipment arrived weekly, a professional-grade table saw that didn't sound like it was. Plotting murder, sanders that actually worked, a drill press that stood straight. I hired an assistant named Marcus, a recent woodworking school grad who was eager and didn't mind that half my instructions came with sarcastic commentary about my failed marriage. Commissions rolled in like a tsunami of wealthy people's money. A tech CEO from San Francisco offered $200,000 for an original dining set. A hotel chain wanted custom furniture for their luxury suites. I was booked solid for 18 months, and honestly, it was terrifying and amazing simultaneously. Then came the magazine feature. From trash to treasure, the man who turned insults into art. The spread was gorgeous. 6 full pages of my workshop, close-ups of my hands working wood, and that damn sculpture's origin story told with the perfect mix of heartbreak and triumph. My mom bought 17 copies. 17. Clara showed up one morning, holding 2 overpriced lattes like peace offerings. Maybe we can start over? She asked, her voice honey-sweet. I laughed, actually laughed, and said, sure. You go back to the trash can, I'll pull you out, and we'll see what you're worth now. She didn't find it funny. I absolutely did. The grand opening of Mercer Studio was everything I'd never dared to dream about. Champagne flowed, art collectors mingled, and my work, actual pieces I'd created with my own hands, hung on pristine white walls under professional lighting that made everything look like it belonged in the Louvre. I'd somehow gone from garage carpenter to gallery-worthy artisan, and the imposter syndrome was hitting hard. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I spotted Clara outside. She was dressed to impress in some designer outfit that probably cost more than my old monthly salary, watching the celebration like a ghost haunting her own bad decisions. Part of me felt bad. The smaller, pettier part felt absolutely vindicated. Sophie showed up, though, and that's what actually mattered. My daughter, who'd laughed at my gift just months ago, walked through the door wearing a genuine smile. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Dad, I'm proud of you." And I told Mom she should have kept the box. Good, I said, my throat getting unexpectedly tight. Tell her next time she throws something away, make sure it's not priceless. Inside, the energy was electric. Lillian gave a toast that made me sound like some kind of artistic genius rather than a guy who'd just been really angry and channeled it into wood. To art that survives trash cans and toxic marriages, she announced, raising her glass. Everyone laughed and cheered. Outside, Clara turned away and walked back to her car. I watched her go and felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual love. Just the quiet peace of knowing I'd moved on to something better. This was the real win, not the money or the fame, but the freedom to finally be myself without apologizing for it. Now I sell out exhibitions across the country. People actually fly in to see my work. The guy whose wife called his art junk. Museums reach out. Collectors bid against each other. My pieces start at 6 figures and only go up from there. It's absolutely insane, and I'm living for every moment of it. Clara tried emailing last month. I've changed. I see your value now. I replied, sorry, appraisal's closed. Then I blocked her. Felt amazing. Bryce? Apparently, the yacht got repossessed. Turns out he was all image and debt. Claire is currently dating some accountant named Dennis who drives a Prius. The downgrade is chef's kiss. And Sophie? She's in art school now, studying sculpture. I paid her full tuition with what she once called junk money. She came home last weekend and showed me her first major project, a beautiful piece about transformation and worth. Dad, you really turned garbage into gold, she said, admiring my latest commission piece. I smiled and put my arm around her shoulders. Sweetheart, that's what I've been doing my whole marriage. She laughed. That's dark, Dad. That's life, kiddo. Sometimes the trash can is just the beginning. And that's how the man they mocked built an empire, one discarded masterpiece at a time.